Mike Levin on Thursday, June 30th, 2022. This will be a very short video today because I'm on my final approach home for the next few hours before I am resettled back in New York City. And I just have been feeling the itch to put out a video. I have a question from a user that I'd really love to answer. I say a user, it's a viewer, a YouTube viewer, one of you. Chalo asks me an interesting question about Scrum, how I feel about it, whether I've encountered it. It's a particular agile development pattern that is replacing longer cycles of planning and product development. And he asks me that based on my mentioning the fact that I've moved so often, moved 12 times in 25 years, so I must have encountered a lot of different jobs and seen a lot. So I'll be answering that on probably the next video, reading his question, which is just so well written, I wouldn't be doing it justice just answering it here. However, I do think I wanted to set the record straight in that I didn't move that many times for work. I've maybe about half of that, so over a 25-year period, out of 12 moves, maybe about 6 of them were for work. I don't job switch that much. I know in tech, a lot of people are like 2 years and move on, and go the next $10,000 or $20,000 higher. But once I was like a vice president in New York City, and then went down to director, my salary level was fixed at that upper point. Once you get in the door at that level and you deliver quality at that level, it rarely goes back down. So I've held it at that point. Now it hasn't been like it's gone higher with inflation through raises, but when you get set at that level as a vice president, you're in an awful rat race to get higher salaries. Never wanted to do it. It's a big red target on your back. You have to become very political and very active at these organizations. And then the other route, a more heavy-hitting developer, well, I'm a self-taught developer. It happens to be in some of the hottest, coolest fields, and I'm good at it, and I even make product based on my skills. However, I am not a pedigreed and certified computer science style developer, nor do I really want to be. And so that other route to the big bucks, to that next 10 or 20,000 level salary increase, I have not pursued that either. So I've been at a fairly fixed level since I went to New York, and my job switches, my few times I've changed jobs has been to get the work I'm doing at the places I'm working more in line with my vibe. This dude is in tune. I am synchronized in that one. So, I mean, y'all know I work for Commodore by now, right? Commodore Computers, one of the pioneers of the home computer and the whole computer industry, really. And the spiritual leaders of a bizarro alternative technology timeline, because the Amiga was so friggin' cool that it could have been, what has become today Macs and PCs. Although the era of Macs and PCs is rapidly on the decline as generic computing ability is coming in to replace it. Now, it's going to take a long time, and it's not going to be a clear process, because graphical user interfaces are graphical user interfaces. The same way the Mac switched out Unix underneath of everybody and hardly anybody even knew it, without even missing a heartbeat. Windows, Microsoft could do the same with Linux. All you Microsoft users out there are likely going to be Linux users without even knowing it. Just like Android users, all your Android users, you're all using Linux. You don't know it, but you're on Android. Because it doesn't make sense to have proprietary in the back end. It doesn't make sense to have proprietary in the back end. You make things proprietary in the front end where the users start to interact with stuff, and your differentness from other people's, from other companies, is a competitive advantage. It differentiates the product. On the back end, where, computers are talking to other computers, and, the code is written that runs the show, you want best practices, you want the time tested, you want the best algorithms that human experience has to offer. And all that stuff is consolidating on free and open source, on Linux in particular. So Nix operating systems, Unix-like operating systems won. And how'd I even get to that? From the job stuff, from the switching, from Shalow's question. I wanted to clarify that, getting in tune with my vibe. I like feeling good about the work I do. I like getting better at how I do the work over time. I take great pleasure in increasing my abilities over time, finding better, newer ways to do things that forever forward improve my game. That's my vibe. I mean, it's come to be my vibe. I'm a blue. I'm an all blue softie. I'm a excessively emotional, sensitive person, right? I mean, y'all know the type, right? Cried easily when we were kids. Easy to pick on. Fun to press our buttons, right? That's me for the most part. However, through whatever course in life, I have toughened up. And there's a lot of risks there when a blue toughens up. They become isolated and distant and aloof. And I'm sure I've gone through that phases. They get Batman complexes, right? It's a classic Batman complex. A blue that doesn't want to become flashy wearing red armor, so my red Wrangler here. But if a blue wants to toughen up, they generally strap on shiny red armor or a red costume of some sort and pretend they're not blue, right? That's where Iron Man comes from, Tony Stark. And that's where the Flash comes from. All the various characters who have been the Flash. But, red armor is a thing for blues. But that's when you really want to put on the full show and you want to engage fully. If you want to live in the shadows and you can't bear red, you use black, right? So that's what Batman is about. He's a blue who has decided to toughen up and become expert at things, but to live in the shadows, to not be flashy. So black is a decent alternative for a sensitive, emotional type who wants to up their game and be engaged in the game, but doesn't want to advertise their, sports cariness of it with red. I've gone through my different color phases, and I don't know what I currently am. It's very difficult to say, but I will know what I like, what I covet. The cool thing is green. Green is cool. Because green is the other natural personality type. See, red and black are contrived colors of blue. But greens are born green, they are green, they stay green. They are not emotionally sensitive, but what they lack in emotional sensitivity, they make up for by being tuned into the material world. They're competitive. They're the hunters. How could green not be the hunter? So if blue is the gatherer, contest-friendly spirit. It's also the one that has all the best toys, all the best weapons, and because it's linear, whereas blue is round and soft, green is shiny and linear, as if you have broken off a tree branch from a tree, green branch. You carve it. You've got an arrow. Right there is your green arrow. So these are just vibes, color models, emotional templates that come from everyday experience, millions of years of evolution. And there's tons of interpretations. This goes on all the time. This is the 4 colors in the Wizard of Oz. Each land has its own color. This is the colors of the Green Lantern Corps, with green being the power of human will, not just human, sentience, though, self-determinism, creativity. So Green Lantern Corps goes with green as self-determined and creativity. Fair enough. I would say that the blues are generally more creative. Blues are motherly and inventive and game changers. They change the game on people. Whereas the kind of creativity in green is more like going from inventing a spear in the first place to putting it on a spear thrower, to putting it on a bow and arrow. Systematic optimizations. It does take creativity, there's no doubt about it, but it's a different kind of creativity than you gotta bring down a mastodon, you're tired of your tribe members being killed in the hunt and the chase. The kind of creativity of a yin who wants to see all, her children of the tribe return with a successful hunt and alive, notices that they're near a cliff at this particular time during the migration. Drive them off the cliff. That's yin creativity, game-changing creativity. Yang creativity is, we need better spears or something. But I covet the yang creativity. I mean, I'd love to be a yin one, a game changer. And it's hard to say. The ones who I want to pull out, as examples of that, really all copied and optimized. Ken Thompson copied and optimized things from Multics and other Bell Labs endeavors. Linus Torvalds copied Ken Thompson. Guido van Rossum copied the ABC team, and so on. So it's rare to find. You know who a blue is? Ada Lovelace is a blue. The person who software programmed Charles Babbage's thinking machine. She was a blue. And a true yin creative. The innovators of high-level programming languages early in the days of digital computers. The woman who programmed COBOL or co-invented COBOL, that would be a good example, I believe. And so on. However, likey, the Green Arrow tools. The Green Arrow tools of tech are Linux and Python and Vim. The Blue Circle tools of tech and text are Lisp and Emacs. If I had more time, if that's the way I wanted to dedicate myself, I would probably venture into Lisp and Emacs more. It's very appealing. Read Paul Graham's essay on the blub paradox. Google blub paradox. I think that's how you find Paul Graham's article. That's what really clued me into how there are truly different things out there. And the most Green Arrow thing of all is the C programming language. The Dennis Ritchie Kerrigan CR, the original C. Not all this bloated variations on C that came later. but the original C that got the basic mechanisms by which the contest kicks in, right? Everyone creates their own version of C so that they can have subtle different advantages and disadvantages. But that basic innovation, bringing BCPL, the thing that really innovated it, another British creation, but to optimize that. So how much can you even credit Dennis Ritchie for C? But the C programming language would probably be my my favorite if I took the time for it. But I'll take the shortcuts. Python is like C with lots and lots of shortcuts and none of the difficulty, none of the startup difficulty. Lots of free add-ons. Batteries included, they say. So I've been aligning myself to my vibe. I've been going places where I can continue to develop and explore my Linux, Python, Vim, and Git philosophy. If there's the Unix way that led to Unix and led to Linux, then there's whatever way I'm working on right now, the obsolescence resistance way for people of average intelligence and dedication levels who don't want to put non-average and atypical dedication into their tools. That's what's required for C. Maybe a little bit less so for things like Rust that get rid of the housekeeping. So, this is one of the things driving the popularity of Rust. If you really want the power and flexibility of C, but you don't want all the objectionable housekeeping stuff, one of the flavors of C is doing it quite well these days. There's a lot of good things being said about Rust. And I think it comes from the Firefox people. And it's so popular that the web full stack, that whole Node.js thing, is being rewritten because of love for Rust. So the thing that is the dominant king of the hill, the person who created it has moved on, said, yeah, that's old school now. Let's move on and re-implement this all with Rust. So the world changes yet again. Fads and fashions move on. But what's impervious to fad and fashions is that original C programming language developed by Dennis Ritchie. It's evolved a few times. The ones that get the real blessing is C89 and now C99. C89 is the American Standards version that's been stamped and said, this is C. This is, if you want to make an official C, make sure it abides by all this stuff. And that was ASCII or ANSI? One of those standards. The American Standards Organization is C89. And then there's C99, which is ISO, the International Standards Organization. And that's still a pretty core set of C. It's not one of these bloated Cs like C++. And they just advanced the Linux kernel officially to be C99 based. So if you're looking for the ultimate green arrow programming language tool, it would probably be C99 at this point. And let's see, what else? But I'm not even going there. There's not enough time in life for all this stuff. So if you had to pick just a few tools, if you had a packet to go, you're getting C for free anyway. Once you learn Python, when you really need to do C stuff, you're in the C camp. You have aligned yourself with C firmly. You've also aligned yourself with Linux, Unix, Linux. And so you're set. You just then need to be able to change what text is where. And so your text editor, Vim. And so where am I going? This is sub-reference. This was tangential. But in all my job switches, I went from places where I couldn't work on and hone my craft, where I was in a PowerPoint world. All these, the higher your title, the more prestigious your title, the more time you're going to be spending in PowerPoint. Or the lower your title. If you're entry level or you're executive level, you're going to be in PowerPoint, because everything becomes abstract and it's your ideas that count, not the using of the tools, but the description of how other people are using the tools on your behalf. And I don't like it. Is not my vibe. Once, your thing you have to do now for our next meeting is to have this PowerPoint deck is the thing. Once that starts to become the thing, that's when I do one of my infrequent job switches. Got out of agency life over that. But if there's new power dangling out there, the fruit has just ripened. That fruit was green, it was inedible. You even tried it. You even tried to get that fruit. And you found that the fruit was icky. It was not quite ready. You didn't like Docker. Virtual machines. You got virtual machines out of your system. You've come to understand virtual machines are generally stupid. Virtual machines are generally stupid. You see that containers are much smarter and understand that containers are what you might have been doing for a while anyway with chroot. It's the formalization of tech that has been around for decades, being used to its potential by putting better APIs on it, better application program interfaces. So the green fruit starts to get red. And you start to get better red. You get better red on why that fruit is getting red. And you learn that the yucky taste of Docker is not a requirement for containers, and that because you're not the only one who feels this way. Other people have had the exact same thoughts, and some of these people are the people who created Ubuntu. And they're like, well, all the tools are there. We just need to connect all this stuff up right and put some nice commands, some nice CLI commands out there. And suddenly we provided the infrastructure for much better everything. Everything becomes better if you take this stuff that Docker, innovated, that chroot innovated, and you just innovate it a little bit more with a program called LXC that installs with a service called LXD. And only recently, the service stuff has stabilized on Linux so that services have a standard API. That's the systemd stuff I talk about. And so the world improves in ways that you've been waiting for since your beloved Amiga computer went away. These are consolation prizes, my friends. The disappointed angel of perfection. Not that the Amiga was perfect. I had stars in my eyes. Preemptive multitasking without memory management was stupid. It was fun. Oh my God, talk about making you resilient. Oh my God. You lived a version of becoming the Kwisatz Haderach. You lived a version of being Duncan Idaho. You lived countless lives because you're always rebooting. Because a crash of any single app on your Amiga brought down the whole Amiga computer, losing however many countless hours of work if you haven't saved recently. So you learn good habits. You learn saving things recently. You learn to be your own safety net. You don't rely on the safety net of hardware. And you definitely try more things because when you're rebooting that often, and maybe you do a slightly different take because you have a new starting point again. So you get to experiment with different things. So this crazy cauldron of crashing, which was the Amiga computer, had hardened up this blue, this soft blue, a emotionally sensitive person who learns to tolerate the Amiga computer's frequent crashes, and then comes to understand that all the good stuff you learned about the Amiga is also Unix, which is also Linux, which is also of value, which is also taking over the world now. Some dots start to connect. Things become much more interesting. Me getting aligned to my vibe has illuminated the way to teach people purposes in life. Ikigais, if you will. Ikigai. Gotta get that pronunciation. Now that I've heard it doesn't sound like Ikigai, all I can think is Ikigai. But when what you're good at aligns with what you love to do, aligns with what you can get paid for, and then this ultimate fourth circle of the Venn diagram, what the world needs. That center intersection of all four of those circles is your Ikigai, and it's a mission and a purpose, a real worthwhile reason for being. And I can think of few better than to be a sort of Pied Piper, and not to be narcissistic. I know people, self-aggrandization, born the same year as Unix and all that stuff, but let me tell you, it is hard to wrap your mind around this stuff. It is hard to wrap your mind around why things are so different now, today, because Microsoft makes Linux so easy to install from Windows 11 than they were even a year ago. The fruit is very ripe, my friends. This fruit is getting red and delicious. Oh, if you've ever eaten a peach or a pear that has, no, not a pear, but a peach or a nectarine that has reached just that magical level of ripeness, and it's sweet and it's soft, and you take these big bites right into near the pit, and it's like just reminds you why it's good to be alive. The Unix-like operating systems have just achieved that level. Linux in particular, it's going to be hard for me to give up saying Unix-like, but honestly, it's mostly about Linux now because systemd, because the next trick coming up is a Linux-specific trick. Mickey's Sorcerers Apprentice. The way it goes is this. Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, rah, rah, rah. Get your butt on Vim as soon as possible, but it's too much to ask you to be productive in Vim right out of the starting gate, so also install Jupyter Lab Desktop. Jupyter Lab Desktop will give you Python. Python will give you the ability to cast Mickey-like Sorcerers Apprentice spells to automate those brooms. Automate some brooms. Make those brooms automated whenever you're sitting there and you cast the spell. Here I am, I'm Mickey, I'm reading out of the Sorcerer's spell book, I cast the spell, and I have to be there to do it. Now imagine making those brooms and mops clean your house automatically when you're not there. This is very much the mental model I need to illustrate and clarify in teaching people what I really mean by getting to systemd. Writing Linux daemons. Lifting things from Jupyter Lab, lifting things from notebooks, and putting them into Linux daemons. Long-running tasks. And your long-running task might in fact be a scheduler. And so what your long-running task is doing is it's managing multiple individual short-running tasks, the things you're scheduling. That will give you a lifetime of stimulation, feeding your soul, if you will, because the things, what can you automate? What kind of spells can you cast? What do you want to do? Everything from having an army of robots to writing marketing reports that inform people of stuff they need to know to make decisions on a daily basis, an hourly basis. The same stuff can drive real-time decisions too. It doesn't have to be these scheduled reports that get emailed. It can dovetail with web development because, oftentimes the purpose of an app is to just be a feed through for some live data source. So these Linux daemons, these Linux system services, are the data source, friends. That's how you create a data source. You put it somewhere so that it has HTTP or whatever, and an app then tunes into that HTTP data stream. So you cover all the parts of it, including those parts that a normal web developer would think are the mysterious things, the Twitter fire hose feed. Where does that kind of stuff even come from? Well, if you're a more general purpose Linux developer, the answer is that's where it comes from. Linux services that you yourself developed that are no harder than any other code. And they can start out in a notebook too. And for those who aren't familiar, notebooks, Jupyter notebooks, are just convenient places to experimentally develop code because it is more interactive. There's a lot of ways to describe it, but I guess more interactive is the best way to go, for lack of having your hands on it and actually have tried it. Stuck at construction, so I'm just thinking whether I have anything else to say about that. Is that all I have to say about that? It might be. How this stuff can be of interest to youth. If I really had someone explain it to me properly in my youth, I would have gotten there faster. But the tools were not there yet. Python was not there. All the other programming languages were these rat's nests. I don't know if I'd have found something that would have fed my soul, vibed with me the way the current set of tools do. I think it just reached this point. Me in my 50s, there is now a combination of technology that together is as love-worthy as the Amiga computer. That's what's happening now. And it'll last for the rest of your life. It's not like the Amiga computer that went away. This stuff is the stuff that's designed to stay. Designed to stay. The Linux APIs in particular, and to a lesser degree the Python APIs, and certainly Vim, certainly the Vim text editor. So on my next video, I'll be answering Chalo's question about Waterfall versus Scrum development, which sounds like blah, 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 but it's really actually a very interesting topic. Waterfall development is just old school, lots of planning, lots of product development, lots of testing, and then lots of, kicking yourself for not having considered enough things earlier in the process. It's the way you work on big projects that usually have physical material costs, so you don't want to get it wrong. And then it has lots of best practices and lots of experts in the field, like bridge building and road construction, and the big projects, the ones that you can't just redo, the kinds that resist rapid iteration. Software doesn't have that same kind of material cost. Software is the perfect thing in which to put out a product fast using wonderful prototyping tools, and then to rapidly iterate, to get feedback from the user, because the joke goes, I designed what they asked for, it's what they wanted. And the person doesn't realize until they see it that what they wanted isn't what they really wanted. What they wanted was something else that they didn't know that they wanted until a version of it was in their hands. So you certainly don't want it to be the finished version. There, I don't even need to do my next video now. But human nature just is, mind-changing and constant refinements on new discoveries. And so you can't really get all the product details right on the first pass on lots of things. Not everything, of course. A bridge is a bridge. But on most things software, there's little reason not to put something in the user's hands quickly and then to rapidly iterate based on their feedback to make it most useful to most people most of the time. So Scrum development and the sprint system and rapid iteration, rapid refinements to a product is to seek out the 80-20 rule solution. The 20% of the work that satisfies 80% of the requirements. You want that, because then after you flesh that out, make 80% of the people with the first 20% of the work. And so Scrum really abides by the 80-20 rule, like very closely. It's close to my heart. And I've worked with Scrum developers at my current place of employ, which I've been at for 6 years, by the way, right? So this is one of the long stretches where I got myself well aligned to my vibe. And Scrum is better. Now, there's a question that Chalo said, isn't it just a way to drive your users harder and to, play off of their, game their inclinations? He put it very eloquently. I should read his feedback. But yeah, it is a form of life hacking for sure. It forces types of employees who would otherwise be specialized and living in their own little world to venture out a little bit, to do maybe a little bit of product testing, to have maybe a little bit of empathy for the end users of the product. Whereas the person who worked on some little minute part of the system normally would not have to actually use the product ever, and they could go home satisfied every day and have a disjointed, a non-integrated view of the world. So Scrum and Waterfall forces a more holistic, a more integrated view of the world. It pushes employees a little bit harder. And like any other system, it can in fact be abused. It can easily become a reason to push employees harder and harder, but you don't have to. It can have downtime for employees, just like the waterfall approach can provide. You cycle off what kind of work the employees who look at I forget all this, it's got all this terminology, all these, frameworks for organizing how you work have terminology like Gantt charts and all that. But, basically there's feedback from the user following these rapid product iterations. And then there's developers saying, I can do that based on a time estimate and availability, and then it all gets worked out kind of like a puzzle so that everyone's working on something that they're available and for and capable of and have ideas about. And so people are generally working on things of more interest, but such a system can be abused to optimize and squeeze as much time out of your workers as possible. So you just mitigate it, just like anything else. You don't want to drive burnout is burnout, whether it's using one approach or another. Certain approaches allow loopholes that let managers create burnout situations more. And yeah, Scrum absolutely is that more than Waterfall, because in Waterfall, you're not going to get your database specialist to, user interface test or whatever. So there's gives and takes. Maybe I'll even skip my next video. I'll certainly read Chalo's eloquently phrased question, maybe as I'm driving out, because you certainly don't want to read it while I'm driving. I'm going to stop for gas first before I go home so that I don't have to do it on the ride out again. Pick up mail for maybe the last time, and then maybe when I'm picking up my mail, I'll wrap it up there, because I want to stop into the community center and ask how to get my last haul of trash taken away. Ugh, didn't make this light. Does that answer your question, Chalo? And is it Chalo or Shallow? S-C-H-A? Oh wait, I'm at a red light. I can just read his question now and not make it the subject of the next video. And I am also getting gas. I can do it there too. 3 hours ago. Okay, I got the green. I'll read it when I'm getting gas. This is how to end the video right. So you stay in a flexible mind state. You don't endanger yourself, right? You don't read something like that while you're driving. At a red is questionable. You got to stay tuned in to the red turning green, like as you saw I just did. And now when I'm getting gas, you may not be able to see me for a second, but I'll do the one continuous take still. There's not going to be any editing of this. 42 minutes is a good video. I said it was going to be a short one, but almost home is still just halfway, I suppose, in my mind. Okay. So I can take this out and put it here so that you're not completely out of the loop as I do this. Okay, there, that'll be fueling. And t-shirt reveal. My truest vibe, my most me t-shirt. Ooh. And just put that back up here. All right. So, viewer, CHALLO, only 3 hours ago, says, Mike, a bit of a detour question that came to mind now that you mention you've moved around so much. I was recently sent by my employer to a Scrum Master course where my eyes were open to how some of the most elite teams in the world function. I'm curious, in your career, did you ever work in a Scrum-based model? The optimist within me believes this is the modern way of working, where a developer is supposed to feel empowered and be brave/free enough to try out new things. At the same time, the pessimist within me sees it as a mechanism to maximize a worker's output while gaming our behaviors to keep the individual constantly on the hook. And that's Chalo there. Yeah. This is your answer video. I think I answered that pretty well. I don't even need to do additional follow-up to that necessarily. I'll go get my mail, and then I'll wrap up because I'll have to stop into the office there to ask them a question. One of the